a mini album I made using the Farmhouse 8x8 paper pad, and I also had a sheet of chipboard elements that I used in addition to whatever I had with the 8x8. My intention was to use just the pad and finish it completely, and there are a few small scraps, but for the most part I did use up this paper pad. I made a 5.5 by 7.5 mini album, and I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough and show you all of the elements inside. So for the cover, I just used some fussy cut elements. This was from the main page of that 8x8 paper pad. I just cut one out, I put it up on some chipboard, I added this little rooster, he's popped up. For a little bit of an element for the hay that the cow was eating, I had a little, some trim, some ribbon trim, and it was gold and it matched perfectly, so I cut a little, and it does look like hay coming from the cow's mouth. I used that same trim to tie it and make sort of a tassel on the spine, and there's a couple of layers here. I did just one of the pieces that was left over I put on there, and on the back I just used this main page. I put it on a sort of a peachy beige colored cardstock with a tomato color cardstock just to have a couple of layers, and added this one item that I cut from the collection. I used this ribbon because it looks perfect, but it was real bright, and I did have to take some Distress ink and tone it down a little. It just was a little too bright. I wanted it to match this a little better, but I thought that was perfect for that. So let me take you inside. So here's one of the chipboard pieces that I used, and I used it as a swing tab. So you move this up, and then this will open, and that gives you a full 2-page spread with just this piece here. Oh, I meant to add something there, so I still do that. So these were adorable. There was one whole page that had all of these black and white elements in it. I backed this one on a couple of layers of scrap cardstock, and then I have this one piece with that check, and I added some of the trim from the just one of the pages that had all of these border strips on it. So these will all go in there, and I thought these would be cute to add to your photos. So here, this is just a side loading pocket, and here is another sheet to add your photos to, and that'll slip in here. This was a chipboard piece that I actually just trimmed down and peeled off the chipboard and just added it just to have a couple of different layers. So that'll go like that, that'll go like that, and that'll go on top. So this page just simply opens up like that. And you could add a strip of paper and journal on here if you wanted to. And so a couple of places to add your photos. And this is just open a little bit, but you could add your photo right there and another picture there. And again, take these cute little elements and add them onto the corner of your photos if you wanted to. Now this is a pocket page mini album, so there are 4 separate pages and there are 4 separate pockets with rooms for additional photos. I used the tab cutter by We Are Memory Keepers and the tab punch, and just punch that from some scrap paper. So that goes in there. So here's another one of the chipboard elements. This one actually has a magnet underneath, and I show you in the tutorial how I do that. And so the magnet is here as well. I backed that with just a scrap piece of paper so it hides the magnet. So here's a piece that's a little tuck spot. This is one of those black and white elements again. Here's a little general store, and that is milk, cream, and fresh butter. and that will tuck into this little tuck spot here on the front of the pocket. And inside the pocket, I just have this little cut apart, which would be a darling place to put a little photo. And again, you could put photos here. You could put a photo there as well. So that goes like that, and that holds together nicely. This page will open this way. And here is a cute little pocket. And I just made this pocket just by cutting the paper to fit and just gluing it on 3 sides, just to keep the book from getting too thick, so you still can add a lot of photos. And again, there's a little tuck spot on the bottom using one of those border strips, and it's got a couple of those pieces that I cut. And here is the hidden photo mat. Now I really liked this paper. So first we can open this like this. That's held down with a magnet. So good room for a photograph. And then this will open, and that gives you lots of room for more pictures. So again, I loved the elements of these flowers on here so much that I fussy cut a couple and put here. It's open, so you could still tuck a picture under there. So that'll close like that, and this chipboard piece will swing open, and that makes a great swing tab. This is just simply a little pocket with the chipboard element right there. So those can go there, and that can go there. So you can use these to put, you know, if you had 2x2 photos or 3x3, you can put a bunch of them on there. And here is the hidden photo page for there. Now this one just simply slides, and even though it's got openings on both sides for a brad, this brad just doesn't do anything. I actually cut the little legs off a little bit, and that'll slide up, and that'll open just like that. This is available to tuck pictures under. Love these elements on this black and white set. Here's another chipboard element I just glued on there for some added dimension. Now these cows were adorable, so I fussy cut them out and cut this little piece out of the same paper, but I wanted the little barn to show. So that shows in the background. And then there is another place for putting a photo. And of course you can put photos in the pockets without putting them on a photo mat if you wanted to. And there is the final photo mat sitting right in there. This I left blank. Now you can put a photo on there, but I didn't want to cover it because there's so much fun stuff to read. I mean, once you put a photo on, you won't be able to read it, but still tells you the price list on eggs for hatching and how much you can get this pair for breeding, and whether you buy a black Hamburg or a white face black Spanish egg. I don't know. I bet they're pretty colorful eggs too. So on the last page I have a large pocket. It's held down with a magnet. Here's a chipboard piece, and that'll open like that. And here is a good sized photo mat and room here to put all those extra pictures that didn't fit in the rest of the book. And there we go with that. And I already showed you the back. So there we go with the Graphic45 Farmhouse mini album. And it is pretty easy to do. You just take it step by step. And I will have the tutorial right now. All right, let's get started. You'll need 2 pieces of chipboard, 5.5 by 7.5, and 1 piece, 2.5, 2 by 5.5. To cover the front, you'll need a piece of cardstock 7.5 by 9.5, 2 of those, and to cover the spine, 5 by 7.5, and to cover the spine on the inside, 5.5 by 5. So let's go ahead and cover the chipboard. I'm going to put that 7.5 by 9.5 size down on my scoreboard. I've got these 2 plastic acetate spacers. They're 1 inch. If you don't have anything like that, you could just cut a piece of chipboard 1 inch. I've put backing of tape, there we go, now you can see it, on the back of the chipboard, and I'm putting it right against the cardstock. This way there is 1 inch all around all sides of it. Now with the spine cover, I want, oh, so the spine cover is 5 by 7.5. I don't know if I said that, but I want 1.5 inches on the sides and 1 inch on the top. I think I gave you the wrong size. No, that's the right size. I cut it wrong. So anyhow, I'm going to put the 2 inches against the 1.5 piece. If you don't have that, again, you can cut a piece of chipboard, and there's 1 inch on the top. So we'll go ahead and put that down, and I'm going to trim this because obviously it is not cut perfectly the way it needs to be. Okay, now let's continue to wrap the pieces. So for the front and the back, you're going to take the cardstock, burnish real well, make sure that adhesive is stuck down, and then I'm just going to put it against my surface to get a good fold on all 4 sides. So I'll fold it and then use that bone folder that I have to burnish it. It should give you a nice crisp clean line. Now I'll do the other sides, the long sides, and do the same. So just make sure you get a nice score line at the corners so you can see where those squares are, because that's really important. What I like to do now is take a pair of scissors. You could also use a straight edge, but I take scissors and I cut out the corners that you now have. You can see where they are because you've got the fold. So just cut those squares right out. It looks like my surface is shaking. I'm actually in my RV. I live and travel and craft in my RV, and we are in Arizona, and it is extremely windy today. I mean, we're getting gusts 25, 30 miles an hour. So that's why I'm doing the voiceover. I think you wouldn't be able to hear me over the wind, but I'm nice and safe inside. So now that I've done that, I'm going to fold again and put the edge of my scissors and just trim a little piece off of the side. See, I'll just do all 4 sides this way, and then I'll turn it over and fold again and do the other 4 sides. It's just going to take the slightest little sliver off, but what happens is when we cover the album, there's not going to be any overhang that's going to go over the edge of the chipboard, so it's going to be a nice, clean, crisp cover. I am using liquid adhesive. I'm using my favorite art glitter glue from the Art Institute. It has no glitter in it, but it's a very good glue. And I've gone to almost using it exclusively on my mini albums. So I'll put it against the edge of the chipboard and then that 1 inch piece. I'm going to take my bone folder, push the glue that's on the edge of the chipboard just so it spreads real well, fold that over, and then taking my bone folder, press the glue so the glue adheres with the chipboard. If you get any glue seeping out, take a baby wipe. I use an inexpensive brand of baby wipes that I just rinse off in water and let dry to get some of the surface lint off of it. So anything that's lint-free will help. You just don't want to have any extra fibers hanging around. So I'm going to do the rest of the sides of the chipboard and get it all covered. And I'm going to go in fast motion here. Don't you wish you could do all these kind of tasks in fast motion? Or actually do house cleaning in fast motion and enjoy your crafting time. Now I'm just taking my bone folder and putting it along the edge just to get a nice crisp clean edge. Beautiful. So go ahead and do the other one. I've already done that, but now we're going to do the spine. So we're going to do the same as far as start and fold all 4 sides against the chipboard, and make sure you crease real well so we can see the crease line. We'll do the long sides too now that I've completed the short. don't rush ahead with this because you do the spine a little differently than what you do the covers. So you still do cut the corners. Now in this case it's a rectangle as opposed to a square. So cut all four corners as close to that score line as you can. You don't want to cut too much in. You don't want to over cut in this case because you don't want the chipboard showing. I mean, there's a couple of things we're going to do to make sure the chipboard doesn't show, but okay, so now we've got the long sides and the short side. I'm going to take my bone folder and just crease the paper down so that is the outside of the spine. Oh, and now I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Fold the paper, grab a pair of scissors, put it against the edge of the chipboard, and just cut in. You see the slivers that I'm getting. I'm not taking very much off at all. But again, you do it this way so it doesn't have any overhang that's going to just get in the way. I think I have one more. Okay, one more. Okay, and we're done. Clean that up. And now I am going to add glue next to the chipboard and for that whole rectangular piece and fold that down. Come on. Okay. And then burnish. I'm being careful that I don't get the glue seeping over. I just cleaned it up with my bone folder. That is a Dress My Craft bone folder. It works really nicely. It's a non-stick surface bone folder, so it doesn't make lines. You know how sometimes you burnish on paper and you can see where you've burnished? This non-stick bone folder doesn't do that. And it's got, that end is a great end to do things, and then the other end with the triangle is useful as well. So anyhow, that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to fold in the long sides. We're just going to do the short sides. I'm going to grab my scoreboard again, and I'm going to take my glue and put a line of glue down about 1/4 of an inch away from where the spine is, and then fill in the rest of it as well. And I'm using the scoreboard because now it gives us a nice surface to make sure things are straight. So I push the side and the top against the scoreboard and then take my cover of the mini album and push it down. I'll grab my bone folder and burnish this real well. There's going to be another layer on top of this, but still, if you make sure each layer is burnished, then that'll help it be straight. All right, I'm going to do the same with this side. Going to add a line of glue about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge and then fill in the rest. You want to be generous with the glue when well, all times, but you don't want it sopping wet that it comes out too much. And as I said, I've used liquid adhesive more so than I ever have. I'll use score tape for some applications, but when it comes to putting something together, any part of a book that's going to be integral to the adhesion of the book, I'm going to use liquid adhesive. All right, now I'm going to push these down. You'll notice that those 3 pieces are all in line with each other. And then I'm going to take that smaller piece, 5.5 by 5. I did put a piece of adhesive in the center. I'm taking off a little bit. There was some showing. I didn't want that showing. Just because I want this to be flat and I didn't want the glue seeping out. You can make it a smidgen smaller than the height of the book, But I find that if I make it exactly the right size, it fits perfectly. You make it the size of the chipboard, the height of the chipboard. And then since I had just the score tape, now I'm adding some liquid adhesive to put in. And burnish real well. And you could use a scrap. It doesn't have to be exactly 5 inches wide. I just used a scrap from my scrap pile. And I'll add some more liquid adhesive here. And then a good thing to do is to let this part dry before you start creasing as if you're turning the cover of the book. That way the glue is dry and it's not going to bubble up. So just burnish real well. That's very important. Okay, I'll let this go a little bit. But just for illustration's sake, when it's dry, you're going to take your bone folder or whatever and go through that crease. You'll bend up the cover, and you're just making sure here that the mini album has a nice crease in it and the cover will move. Again, I'd give it 5 minutes and let it dry. So there we go. There is the cover to your mini album. So now let's move on with the next step. All right, we're going to do the hinge mechanism. So here's the size you need. 4 3/4 by 8 1/2. And I'll go over the scoring as we go to the scoreboard. So we're going to have 4 hinges and 3/8 of an inch in between the hinges. So we'll start at 1 1/2, do 1 1/2, 2, 2 1/2, 2 7/8, 3 3/8, 3 7/8, 4 1/4, 4 3/4, 5 1/4, 5 5/8. Yep, right there. 6 1/8, 6 5/8. Okay, so you'll see we have the 4 sets of 1/2 inch hinges and 3/8 in between. And then I'm going to take this and fold in between those 2 1/2 inch pieces. I'm turning it over and folding towards the raised side. And so I'll fold it 4 times here for each of the sets of 1/2 inch hinges. Make sure you match up the sides. Don't let it get wonky on you. See how I make sure the sides are even. All right, now that I've done that, then I'm going to fold up where the gusset and the edge of the hinges are going to be. Basically, it's all the other folds that we haven't folded. We'll fold up and then score. I like to, burnish. I like to burnish this as I go, because then once I add the adhesive, it's trained, and you're just going to get a better fold. I think I have 1 more, maybe 2 more. It didn't seem like it was matching up on the side, so I was double checking it. Again, make sure your sides of the paper match up. All right, now I'm going to pinch the hinges just again to make sure they know we're training the paper here. You see there's a hinge and then the gusset, hinge and gusset. Now I'm going to turn it over, and you've got all these V folds where the hinges are, and I'll add glue. I'll try to add glue. Never fails. When I'm on camera, it does not want to come out right. But I'll add some to the center, and then just on one side of the hinge. I don't need it on the other side. And since I'm working pretty fast, I'll put glue on the rest of it. For your first one, I would just put glue on and then burnish it. But again, I'm working pretty fast, so I'll be okay with this. I'm grabbing a mini surface to work on because I don't want to get the surface. Not that it's perfectly clean, but I'm trying to keep it free of glue. And now I'll pinch on those hinges, getting the glue to slip slide and attach the hinge to its partner. I'm going to grab my bone folder and burnish. So again, since the hinge mechanism is one of the most important parts of your mini album, take your time with this and make sure that you've got a good stick. If some glue comes out like it did there, grab your wipe and just clean it up. Making sure my surface doesn't have any more glue on it. So I'll fold it one way and burnish. Go through all 4 hinges, fold the other way and burnish. And just go back and forth a couple of times until I feel like it's got enough movement to it that it everything is stuck together. They're all one way, so I'm taking the side of the bone folder and moving it, turning it all the other way, and burnishing with the side of the bone folder. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, now I'm going to take my hinge and figure out where it's going to go on the spine. And I sort of eyeball it. I know where I want it to go. I'm adding adhesive. Again, I'm being somewhat generous. I don't want it sopping wet, but I do want to get a good stick. I'm leaving about an inch on each side just to give my hand something to grab onto. I'm going closer to the bottom than I am the top, but making sure it's even from side to side. I don't want this to be wonky. If this is wonky, then everything's wonky afterwards. So take your time, make sure that it is even. I used to measure it, to draw a line, but I found that I really didn't need to do that. I was pretty good at eyeballing it, but do what works for you. So I start from the center and I use my fingers to burnish it. And then, as I said, I start from the center, then I go to one to the right and burnish, and one to the left and burnish. And I find that it helps with the movement of the hinges if you start in the center and go towards the outside. So now, I mean, it's only got 4 hinges, so now that it's done, I burnish, I grab some glue to put the rest of this hinge down. Do the other side. I don't worry too much about this because I know I will have paper covering this as well. And some people at this point cover the inside. Instead of having chipboard showing, they cut a piece of cardstock so you don't see any chipboard. It just is all cardstock. I don't see any reason to do that. It just adds bulk. I mean, it looks pretty. It's nice. It's a nice finished look while you're making it, but you're going to cover it with cardstock anyhow. So, but if that's something you want to do, you go for it. All right, now I'm taking 4 6x7 pieces and 4 5x7 pieces. I am going to make 4 pages with this. Take the 6x7 piece, and we are going to put the 6-inch side at the top and score at 1/2 inch. This one I'm rotating all the way around, but I realize with the next one you don't have to. You want 1/2 inch on each side. So here I'm scoring, whoops, there we go, at 1/2 inch and then at 5.5. I'm sorry that I'm a little out of camera, but you can see what I'm doing. So take the other 2 pieces and score at 1/2 and 5.5 and the last one. Okie dokie. And that is all the scoring you have to do for the base page. Now I'm moving everything out of the way, and I am going to grab a pair of scissors and I'm going to miter the corners. It's easiest if you take the scissors and go from the indentation out like this. This way you don't always get a good cut, but I've done it so long I'm going to continue to do it. But if you're new to this, I would just let your scissors hit that indentation and cut from there. That way you don't ever overcut it. Go back, rewind, and see what I did with that very first cut, and you'll see what I mean. Now I'm burnishing the folds and taking that smaller piece. And so I want to put the little tabs on the outside as opposed to the inside. And the reason I'm doing that is if you're putting in pages in your mini album, if you have too many things for your pages to get hooked on, then your page won't slide in your hidden photo mat. I also did cut a little sliver of it off. I mean, just a 32nd of an inch maybe, just a little sliver. And now I'm going to apply glue to the inside of the tab. I'm going to try. Here we go with the glue again. There we go. Apply glue to the inside of the tabs. Why I go up and down with one and side to side with the other, I don't know. It's just just easier for my wrist, I guess. Then I'll fold it down and burnish it real well. So again, the tabs are on the outside of the pages. If you were to look at the inside of my pages, sort of open it up and look through the tube, there is nothing to impinge a mat from sliding in. Not that it's a big deal. But see, there's the tube and there's nothing inside. So let's do the other pages just like that, and then we'll move on. All right, I've done all 4 tubes. See, there we go, there's the tube. Now the tube's going to slide over the hinge. I'm just dry fitting it here, and then I'll add glue to the top half of the hinge. You don't want to go too far down to the bottom, just the top half, and do both sides. I'm trying to figure out the best way to get it, and then I realize I'm not in camera. I will correct it as we go. And then put the tube over the hinge. Make sure it's straight. You know, look side to side, top to bottom, and it's straight. You still have some time to move it because it is liquid adhesive. And then I'm using my fingers just to burnish it. Here I'm doing the one side, and I'll flip it over and do the other side. And then add the tube and match it up with the one you just did so the sides are even. And then I pull them straight up so it's facing the ceiling, like the edge of the tube's facing the ceiling, so you make sure that they're the same height when you put them in. If you overdo it with the glue, just wipe it up. No big deal. All right, and then add some more glue. I think we got 2 out of 3 done. Let's finish the other ones. So that'll go on. If you have a problem getting these pages on, if it's too tight, you can take a little bit off of the hinge. Just make a diagonal cut from the very top of the hinge to about halfway down the hinge, and you'll find the tube will fit a little easier. All right, one more. You see, I'm not going crazy with the glue. You don't need that much. The important thing is that you do a good job of burnishing it. If the glue doesn't touch both surfaces, then it's not doing its job. So I put in the last page, make sure it's lined up. Burnish with my fingers. I'm going to go back with the bone folder in a sec. after I clean up. There we go. So now I'll take the bone folder and go over all of the pages that I did. And there we go. 4 pages, all ready to rock and roll. So now I've covered the front with some orange paper and then the plaid paper that I cut 1/4 of an inch smaller. And I am going to use some, at this point I'm starting with some brown distress ink, but I end up going to smoke soot, black soot. All right, here's pages. Okay, so the measurements for the inside front cover are 3 1/4 by 5 1/2, 5 1/2 by 7. And the pattern paper, I cut 2 of 6 1/4 by 5 1/4 and 2 of 2 3/4 by 5 1/4. And I'm looking at my chipboard shapes, trying to decide which one I need. And I'm going to sand the edges because there's that little tab that keeps it into the chipboard. So I'm just going to sand it to get that off. Some people ink the edges of the chipboard. You can if you want. I'm giving you the measurements of the pattern paper for the first couple of pages, but by the middle of the book I stop. I'm sure you can figure it out. I'm grabbing a black brad and putting it in that little chipboard piece. Just getting everything ready. So the 5 1/2 by 7 piece, you're simply going to score that with the 7-inch side at the top at 1/2 inch. I'm turning it over just so everything's straight up, but it really doesn't matter. And the 3 1/4 by 5 1/2 score at 1/2 inch as well. That's going to be easy. I don't have any intricate folds here, but it does go together very quickly, and it's the paper that makes it fabulous. All right, go ahead and miter the corners. I'm cleaning up. Fold and burnish on the score lines. Incidentally, I am using a combination of 65 pound and 110 pound. Most of these flaps are 110 pound. If I make pockets, I make them 65 pound. If you have a good paper, something that's 85, 87 pounds, you just use that exclusively. You don't have to switch back and forth. But in this case, I wanted my flaps to be really strong. So now I will add glue. I will get this figured out by the end of the video, how to get the glue to come out the first time. And put it on the tab of that larger flap, the 5 1/2 by 7. And that's going to go towards the center, well, towards the right-hand side of the page, but not to where the fold line is. You can see I'm about 1/8 of an inch from the fold line. Here I'm making sure that it worked well and the cover still folds. And burnish it real well. Now this one's going to go on the right-hand side of the inside front cover. I'm sorry, did I say right? It's going on the left-hand side. Fold and burnish. And so now I'm going to figure out where I'm going to put the pattern paper and where I'm going to put the brad. Okay, come on, Debbie. Move it over so we can see. I don't look at my my computer that has the picture on it, but here I'm just centering it and taking that circle and making a mark, and then going up about 1/2 inch, making sure it's centered, and putting a hole. And I'll take my little brad and put it through the hole. Just pushing it down, and I'll use a pencil eraser just to push this down raw. So I want to put that brad and the chipboard on before I glue that to the paper. Isn't this paper adorable? So I used the other side of the fresh eggs. If you cut the piece for the page, you will have this piece of scrap left over. So just cut it down to size. Knowing that I only had a certain number of papers, I was real careful to make sure the measurements would work out well. Like if there was a scrap, then I used that size to make a flap. And then I will take the other papers and glue it to the center and to the flap. Oh, you know what I realized? So here I'm switching to the black ink. Not knowing exactly how much paper I had left, I left some areas plain. I mean, I did not add the pattern paper to it until I knew for sure I had enough paper left over to do it. Now, if you're following my mini album exactly using the same papers, you'll be okay. Just you'll see from the walkthrough where I used pattern paper and where I used cardstock for my stash. I did not have the coordinating patterns and solids for this collection. If I had, I certainly would have used that. But I didn't. Again, I was challenging myself to use what I had in my stash without buying anything else. That's probably why I used 4 pages instead of 5 or 6 like I usually do, just knowing that I had a limited amount of paper. I had to work with what I had. And I'm grabbing the paper pad. So the 8x8 paper pad has 3 sheets of 8x8 double-sided paper. So you get 24 sheets of paper. So you see where I left some blank. All right, now let's do page 1 front. And I've marked them all ahead of time, by the way. So page 1 front, you'll need a piece of cardstock that's 7 by 2.5 and a piece that's 7 by 4.5. The pattern paper, you'll need 2 of these at 4 by 6 3/4 and 2 by 6 3/4. So now that we've got that all cut, we'll take our scoreboard and start with the 2.5 by 7 with the short side at the top. Simply score it 1/2 inch. And the same with the other one. Score with the short side at the top at 1/2 inch. I'm telling you, these are easy pages. All right, let us miter the corners. Are you tired of me saying that? Do I need to not say that and you know from now on just to miter the corners? I always miter the corners. Okay, now we're going to take and fold and burnish and add glue to the little tabs. And the larger one we're going to put with the tab on the bottom. So just do your best to line it up with the bottom of the paper and then open it up and burnish. Make sure that glue gets all smushed around. Technical term there. And same with the top. Just make sure it's straight. And fold and burnish down on the tab. So this one I'm going to use magnets to keep it closed. We can go ahead and put the pattern paper on the outside of the top. Don't go too far ahead of me. So I'm taking my Black Soot Distress ink and inking around the edges. All right, so I'm taking the magnet and I put pieces of score tape on each one once I have a pair. So you match them up, you put them and let them kiss each other. So one will go on the top. If I just had it down half an inch more, you could see. And then I have both pairs there, and I'm peeling the tape off and letting that one pair, the other one, push down. So you've got a matching pair of magnets. Now we can cover the magnets. I don't do anything special. Occasionally I'll add a little glue around it if I feel like it's not going to stay in place. But usually the tape that I adhere it with is going to hold it down enough. So I'll push this down. Make sure that magnet's there. And then I can cover the magnet on the small piece on the top and continue putting the pattern paper down. I like to, when I'm doing pages side by side, to coordinate the papers. So if you see a lot of the roosters and chick paper on the left side, you'll see a little bit of it on the right side. And if you see some of that black honeycomb paper, I'm going to also repeat that on the other side. Now I don't always do that, but in this case, when I have a limited amount of paper, I am just making sure that the book flows smoothly. All right, and so that's that. I was trying to decide what to put on the inside, and I decided I'm going to let that go to the end and again see what I have left. Now the magnet is holding this page down, but I'm still going to take one of the chipboard elements and use that just as a decorative element. It seems like this chipboard element is adhering the page, but it doesn't. All right, let's go on to the next page. Okay, for the back of page 1, you'll need 2 pieces of cardstock that are 4 by 5 inches for the flaps, and then you'll need a piece 8 by 3 7/8 for the pocket. The pattern paper, you'll need 2 3 1/4 by 6 1/4, and you'll need 4 3 7/8 by 4. For 2F, the front of page 2, you'll need a piece 2 by 3 3/4 and a piece 4 1/2 by 4 3/4. The pattern paper, you'll need 2 4 3/8 by 4 1/2 and one that's 6 3/4 by 4 3/4. And grab your scoreboard and let's take the 8 by 3 7/8 and score on the side at 1/2 inch. So you're going to score on 3 sides, 2 short sides and 1 long side to make the pocket. That's an easier way of putting it. The 4 by 5 inch flaps, you're going to score the short side at the top, 1/2 inch on both of those. And then for the other ones, that 2 by 3 inch piece, just score in half at 1 1/2 with the long side at the top. All right, I'm not going to say it, but you know what to do here. Oh, but we haven't mitered a pocket yet. So against where the X is, the 2 score lines, you're going to cut straight through that, almost straight through. I go at sort of a little angle. Okay, now we're ready to put everything into the book. Okay, for the back of page 1, take those 2 flaps and add glue to the little tabs. Oopsie, so I made a little mess. No big deal, we're going to cover it with paper. Start on the left-hand side and put the 1 flap over to the edge of the page on the left-hand side. Then put glue on the other one, and you're going to put this on the right-hand side, but you want it to meet in the middle. So don't use the edge of the paper as a guide. Use the edge of the flap on the left as a guide for where you're going to put this one. Now you could have them overlapping a little bit if you want, but I had them snug against each other. It's no big deal either way. And then grab your boom folder and burnish that glue. It wasn't folding, so I went from the outside to burnish as well. Easy schmeezy. Now the pocket is going to go inside. Dry fit it first. I don't think I did here, but it worked okay. But dry fit it first. If you need to make it a little shorter, then go ahead and add a score line 1/8 of an inch away from where you did that one. I'll put the bottom in, and then I will add glue to the sides, and then fold it up, and voila, you've got a pocket hidden by 2 flaps. And for the front of page 2, I'm taking that little piece and I'm going to adhere it to the top of the page. I just decided to do something a little funky, just to have a little flap come up, but instead of being folded at the top, it was on this smaller piece of paper. So I'm putting glue on there and adding the that square piece on it, just going down about 1/4 of an inch. And then I do mix up what side of the paper I'm using. If you need to, go back and refer to the walkthrough of the book, just so you see. I did take that smaller piece and put it in the pocket. There we go. Now it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom of the pocket. And again, I'm in paper conservation mode, so it was okay that I just used a scrap of the paper. I added this piece in the back just so I could see, because when you have so much black layer upon layer, I wasn't sure if I was lining this up correctly. So that's why that piece was back there for a second. So I've got the milk buttons inside the pocket, and I've got the cow and ducks and chickens on the outside of the pocket. And I ended up using the milk buckets on all 4 of the flaps. Oh, but before I put down the one on the right side outside, I need to put a magnet down. So I put the flaps down, put the one on the right side front down, then realized, nope, need a magnet. So here I'm going to choose what I'm going to use as a chipboard element for the closure. And I end up going with that oval one, about near my thumb. Yep, the farmhouse one. Decided that didn't like the rooster one. I grabbed the farmhouse one, and that's going to go on the outside. So I'm going to attach it onto the left side flap, and have the magnet on the right side of the chipboard element and on the right side flap. So I'm grabbing my little brads and putting the brads in, even though they're not really doing anything. They're just there because there's holes in that chipboard piece and I want to make it look more complete. So I grab my brads and then I grab a scrap of paper and trace around the farmhouse sign. I'm just using some black cardstock and I just cut it by hand. So I cut the oval and then I put the brads in. Just make the little legs of the brad so you can't see them. I add a little piece of score tape and add a magnet so it's sandwiched in between the paper. I put its partner on the outside, but I glue. I know where it's going to be, so I just adhere a little piece of score tape, put the magnet down. Now I cover it with the patterned paper. And then I'll grab my little chipboard piece. I'm going to add some score tape to it plus glue just to make sure it adheres real well. Sometimes I think that the score tape will hold it while the glue is drying. So I just match it up with the magnet on the left hand side and then glue it, and we've got a nice closure. I ended up cutting another piece, half an oval, to put on the back of this, just because I didn't like the black of the cardstock showing. So again, I just add the score tape and some glue, match up the magnets, and that will stay closed. All right, now the other side. So pretty simple. I'm just going to take that piece with the cow, the decorative paper, and put it on that square. Now later on, as I'm decorating, I do end up making a pocket just with pattern paper. I don't cut it out of cardstock, and that'll go on the underside as you fold that cow flap up. And then the bottom just has some pretty pattern paper. I do use a magnet to keep this all attached. Okay, the back of page 2, you need a piece of cardstock 5 by 6.5 and a piece 5 by 4. For the front of page 3, you need a piece 6 by 4.5, and you'll need a tag that I used 3.25 by 6.5, but you really could make that what you want. So the side pocket, you will score on 2 short sides and 1 long side. That's the 6 by 4.5 inch piece, and the other 2, the 5 by 6.5 and 5 by 4.5, with the 5-inch side to the side, you're going to score at 1/2 inch. So the 6.5 inch side to the top, you'll score at 1/2 inch, and the 4-inch side at the top score at 1/2 inch. This is a fun page. I like this one. Let's go ahead and miter the corners, and then fold and burnish on the score lines. Okay, and then let's go ahead and take the book and take the tab of the 5 by 6.5 inch piece, add glue to the tab, and that's going to go all the way to the left of 2B. All the way to the left. So I'm going to put it and make sure you're lining up the top and bottom of that page. Okay, now you'll take the other one, the 5 by 4 inch piece. Okay, whoops, hold the presses. So that 5 by 6.5 inch piece, and I'm holding this down with these little clips. I realized that I want it a little bit shorter because I'm using a round chipboard element as a closure, sort of a swing tab, and there is not enough room on this page to do it. So I'm taking the paper and realizing that there is just not enough room. So while that paper is still attached, I go over to my cutting board and cut a 1/2 inch off of it. So if you're smart, start with a 5 by 6 inch piece, but we will make that adjustment now. So again, I just take it over, slide it over to my cutting board and put it on, and cut it, I mean. So I'm going to take this chipboard piece and figure out where the new marking will be, and I'll mark it with a pencil right on that decorative paper that I'm going to glue on there. And then I grab a brad. Well, I'll make a hole first, and then I'll grab a brad and put it on here and glue this page down. And then I take that 5 by 4 inch piece, and with the scored tab on the right hand side, I'm going to center it on that flap, that 5 by 6 inch flap. You'll see in just a second how I adhere it. So you'll notice at this point in the instructions, I've stopped giving measurements for the pattern paper. I mean, you know, I cut it 1/4 of an inch smaller than the cardstock. So you can just go from here and you can choose whichever paper you want. You don't necessarily have to use what I did. Now, I especially love that flower paper and really wish I gave it more of a prime location in the book. But I'm adding a magnet here. So I put score tape on one side and the magnet. I put that score tape paper on top of it and put its partner magnet. I'm adding a touch of glue. So when I fold it over, I see exactly where I need to add more score tape. That's just another way I add magnets. And actually, I do that a lot of time. Take off that excess glue and voila, the magnet sticks where I need it to. I'm trying to decide which paper do I want them to match here. And I love this paper so much that I do allow this one to match. Yep, that's what I'm going to do. So I'll go ahead and add the glue to it. Did anyone notice that I forgot to ink around the edges of this one? I inked around the edge of the polka dot side, but not on this one. But you really can't notice it too much since the paper is on a black background. I don't think you notice. And once you put a picture on it, you wouldn't notice anyhow. Oh, isn't that great paper? I almost would want a wallpaper. Well, maybe not. Maybe for a day. All right, so there is that side. I'm burnishing this on just because I want to make sure I get around the magnet. And then we'll close that and put paper on here. I do like this one. I don't know if you notice on this one, I did remember to ink around the edges, and there were some elements on the paper that I inked over just to make them not stand out as much as the cow. Like on the right-hand side, the yellow and orange sign, I inked that so it's very muted. You don't notice it. I cut this piece down so that what shows is just about an inch. So I cut this, I think, about 3/4 of an inch. It's a little bit too short. It looks more like 1/2 an inch, but it's okay. Yeah, you barely notice it. So there's that. And I adhere that. And then we're ready to move on. And 3F is pretty simple. I just add that pocket over to the left-hand side of the paper and add the decorative paper on top. I use the black polka dot here, and inside the pocket I use just a piece of that wheat paper. And then I make the tag. I did use my We Are Memory Keepers corner chomper and chomped a scallop on all 3 pieces of paper. I take the chipboard element with the cow. It's really 2 pieces, but I just glued it all together and put that right over that black polka dot paper. I think that composition works well. All right, now I'm going to fussy cut these cows that were from that off-white and black paper with the print on it. I really liked these guys. You know, especially there's a cow on the front page. So I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut this. And for 3B and 4F, you'll need 4 1/4 by 6 1/4 and 2 1/2 by 8. Simple. On the, what are we going to do first? The 4 1/2 by 6 1/4, I'm going to score with the 6 1/4 inch side at the top at 1/2 an inch. Turn it upside down just so the writing is the right way. The next one for 4F, we're going to score on 2 short sides and 1 long side at 1/2 an inch. And miter the corners and fold and burnish. And the one for 3B, we're just going to put over to the right-hand side of the paper. Now it's smaller than the pages, so make sure you center it on the side. And this one I am going to put another chipboard piece on the left-hand side as a swing tab. So you should know how to do it, but we'll go ahead and do that one. So I take the pattern paper that's going to go underneath the flap and take my chipboard piece, mark where I'm going to make a hole, and make a hole. Now on this one I also have a brad on the right side, even though we don't need it. I cut the little legs of the brad off so it doesn't show through. And then I attach that chipboard piece and then adhere the paper to the page. Easy schmeezy. And then I go ahead and adhere the patterned paper to the flaps. Nothing tricky about this. I don't need a magnet because that chipboard piece will act as a swing tab, swivel tab. You can call it what you want. And then on the 4F, so I mean, it's normal. You're going to cut a pocket just the way you would normally cut a pocket. The only thing tricky about this one is the fact that I wanted that little barn to show in the paper. So when I fussy cut the cows, I didn't fussy cut around all the legs. I sort of squared it off. So when I put the paper down on top of the pocket, that barn is between the two cows. I didn't like a lot of the heads to be sticking up because I don't want it to get messed up when you're putting things in and out of the pocket. So just watch out for that. You'll notice that I put it on and then I realized my mistake. See it all to the right. And then I figure out where the cows are going to go and say, nope, that's not what I want. So I peel it up. And you can do that if you act fast with this paper. I mean, with the glue. If you don't act fast, you're done for. So again, it works because I squared off cutting that cow. A little bit of its tail is hanging off the page, but I won't tell if you don't tell. So that is that. We only have one more page in the back inside cover. Can you believe it? So for the last page, I actually don't do anything to it. For the back inside cover, what I need to cut is a piece that's 4 5/8 by 7 3/8 and 4 by 8 1/2. We're going to score the 4 by 8 1/2 on 2 short sides and 1 long side to make a pocket, and the other piece we will score with the short side at the top to make a flap. Score it 1/2 inch. Go ahead and miter and burnish on the folds. And then we're going to take the pocket and add it to the page on the bottom. Make sure that you go all the way to the right hand side. You don't want to go ahead and put it anywhere near the fold of the page. If the paper's too big, then just go ahead and score it another 1/8 of an inch because you don't want to impinge the folding or the closing of the back cover. So we'll add glue to the 3 tabs on the pocket. And we'll add, I already added that top flap to it. And I'm going to use magnets to adhere this. So I'll go ahead and put in the magnets. You all should be experts on it by now. My favorite method is the drop of glue method. It never fails. That way I know exactly where to put them. So I'll add my pattern paper. Now I round the corners of the flap of the pocket. I always like having a flap at the back of the book because it's a good place to add any extra photos or memorabilia you have that you didn't find a place for it throughout the book. You could make a folder, you know, just a piece of paper folded to put all these pictures in, but I just would leave them straight. All right, and then I'm adding this great newsprint to that back page. Give you something to read if you want. And adding a piece to the front of the pocket. And that matches nicely. I use a piece of plain cardstock. It's sort of a yellowish beige, I don't know. But it matches with the paper. I use that bone folder to make sure I go all the way down to the bottom, going over that little tab from the pocket. And then I'm going to cut this little loop on this chipboard piece, and I use my X-Acto to scrape it. Use some Distress Oxide just to match with that outline. I have to go in a little deeper. And then add this to the bottom of the flap just to sort of have a pull tab. And there we go. Now I do go through and decorate a little more. This is where I'm showing you how I do the spine. I have this piece of trim that's sort of like tassel trim, and I just take a piece and layer it, take a piece of seam or thread, put an eyelet back there, tape this down. Not anything too fancy. I just wanted a little bit of a dangle. And I have this piece actually because if you remember, the cow is munching on some hay. And so I wanted something to match that, just so it all would be cohesive. So I put a piece of tape on the back and then glue this and go through the walkthrough and see how I decorated. You know, I did use some cardstock in the inside of pages, and I really didn't have anything left. I just kept going through and cutting paper down, making tuck spots, little decorative elements, doing the cover, and just what I could to use up all the paper. And I really only have little bitty scraps. I don't think I have anything any bigger than a 2-inch scrap. So it was good use of this paper. I might try another one with another Graphic45 collection using this same tutorial. And there we have it. Thank you so much for following along. Hopefully you've made a mini album using the Graphic45 Farmhouse paper collection. I know it came out in 2020 and I'm a little late to the party, but it's still a fabulous collection. So if you have it, dust it off and see what you can make. Again, I made this all with an 8x8 pad with the chipboard elements, and that's all I had to make it with. Besides cardstock, I had it in my stash and some ribbon. So thanks again for watching. Please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. That's what I have for today. Have a fabulous day.